12 of the fantasy football season, and he has a few wide receivers I would bench this week. The first guy, Odell Beckham Jr. of the Los Angeles Rams. So Beckham here, he's going to have a decent role, I believe, with this Ram team, even though he's pretty much been non-existent for most of the season when he was with the Cleveland Browns. But he did have the bye week here to learn the playbook more and stuff like that, especially with Robert Woods out of this for the season. So in the first game for him with the Rams at the San Francisco 49ers, Week 10, 2 catches, 18 yards. So this week here, a tough matchup for Beckham at the Green Bay Packers that give up the 6th least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. So right now, I think Beckham, his best years are behind him. I don't think he takes the game as serious like he once did when he first broke into the league. And also, he got his big money now. So right now, he's coasting, in my opinion. I know he's got a decent opportunity to win a championship this year with the Rams. But this week in a tough matchup at Green Bay and a bad season this year with inconsistency and barely putting up fantasy numbers, he's an easy wide receiver I will bench this week until he proves me wrong. The next wide receiver is T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. So T. Higgins, he was better in his rookie season than he is this year here. And plus, he had an injury early in the year. So Week 8 at the Jets, 4 catches, 97 yards. Week 9 versus the Browns, 6 catches, 78 yards. And then Week 11 at the Vegas Raiders, 2 catches, 15 yards. So right here, Week 12 for Higgins and the Bengals. They got a pretty decent matchup versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I just can't trust Higgins right now. Besides Joe Mixon and obviously Jamar Chase and Burrow, everyone else is a crapshoot over there, in my opinion, for Cincinnati. So Higgins, he could either have a 90-yard receiving game or a 15-yard game like we saw. But in this one, I think he'll get 4 or 5 catches, 50 or 60 yards, and that's not much of anything, especially if it's not a PPR league this week. So right here, with better options, I believe, at receiver that most teams should have. Higgins is a guy that would see the bench, in my opinion. The next wide receiver is Jeudy of the Denver Broncos. So Jeudy, he had a lot of injuries early on in the season, and he returned in Week 8 versus Washington, 4 catches, 39 yards. Week 9 at Dallas, 6 catches, 69 yards. Week 10 versus Philly, 6 catches, 48 yards. So right here, his ceiling pretty much is about 5 or 6 catches, 50, 60 yards here for Jeudy. And this week, he's got a very tough matchup versus the Chargers, even though we saw the Chargers give up 30-plus points to the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. But I think here, Jeudy, it's going to be tough for him. It's going to be tough for Teddy Bridgewater. I know it's a home game here for the Broncos, but I think the Broncos are going to try to run the football a lot in this ball game and keep Justin Herbert and this offense off the field. So right here, Judy's ceiling is pretty much 11 to 12 fantasy points, and that's in PPR leagues as well. So I don't think he's going to put up a big number this week. And he's a wide receiver I would shy away from and bench this week. The next wide receiver is Kenny Golladay of the New York Giants. So it was good to see Kenny Golladay back and healthy the last couple games here for the Giants. But this guy, he's pretty much been a total bust for the Giants and fantasy owners this season. The last 2 games here for Golladay, Week 9 versus the Raiders, 2 catches for 28 yards. And Week 11 at the Bucs, 1 catch, 12 yards. So right now at this point in his career, he's just a name and a guy with a big injury tag on him for fantasy football. And this week it's a tough matchup versus the Eagles that give up the 3rd least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. I know it's a division matchup. Anything could go. We could see a big ball game from him. But after these horrible performances and the injuries this season, there's no reason I would trust him and no reason he should really be rostered instead of 12-team leagues or deeper maybe. So right here, he's an easy wide receiver I would bench. And the 5th and final receiver I would bench is Emmanuel Sanders of the Buffalo Bills. So Sanders, he had a couple big ball games in the midweeks of the season, but the last few weeks here, he hasn't done much of anything. Week 9 at Jacksonville, 4 catches, 65 yards. Week 10 at the Jets, 2 catches, 27 yards with a rush attempt for 24 yards. And Week 11 versus the Colts, 3 catches, 26 yards. So this week on paper, it is a good matchup here for Emmanuel Sanders at the New Orleans Saints, one of his former teams that gives up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the year. I know it's a fast track indoors, but after the last few games where he hasn't done anything here as Sanders, I just can't trust him this week here with his ceiling being 10 or 11 fantasy points. So that's a few wide receivers I will bench here for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.